Hi, I'm ED-SKaR, and today's video will be a standalone build log of this SDKFZ251 that I won at my local tournament a little while back. I say standalone as I usually pair up a build video with a painting video, but I have a plan for painting my German vehicles and I'll be doing that separately. This kit naturally includes the smoke markers, transfers and stat cards. Now specifically, this is the /9 Stummel variant, which I don't think is all that amazing, so I'll actually be building it as the -1 Transport Hanomag, and you can do both with this kit. The sprues are pretty simplistic compared to some kits with quite a few larger pieces, and these small pieces are often merged together. It oddly reminds me of the Italeri M3 half-track. Actually, that's not very odd, it makes a lot of sense, given that that's the American counterpart to this vehicle. The moulding feels ever so slightly less good quality than other Italeri kits I've had, but I really can't nail down why I feel that way. There are mould lines, of course, but that's not special, and the detail is pretty good on the hinges, the crew, and the other small pieces around the model. The two main sprues make the /1 standard variant of the Hanomag, and this little separate sprue gives you the upgrade parts to make the /9 Stummel, and that gives me a plan that I'll come back to in a moment. I did notice that there are 3 machine guns in the kit, 2 from the main sprues and 1 on the Stummel sprue, and that third one is notably less detailed than the first 2, and even those are somewhat simple compared to the MG42s on infantry squads from Warlord games. I'll address that later on, but first I need to start assembling the model. The track assemblies are a single piece for each side and glued directly to the hull. There are 2 little surfaces on the hull and matching ones on the track sections, and these sandwich to hold the tracks really quite securely in place. There is a middle hull piece that fits onto the lower, and that gives the angled lower armour and mounting for the internals. Finishing off the underneath, we have 2 front wheels and a steering piece. Now the wheels here are quite a bit loose, but it means you can model them turning if you want to. Now I wanted to have them facing straight, and so I left the front wheels to dry before attaching the suspension set to the front of the hull. For the sides of the hull, the wedge-shaped gaps are covered by some panels that I think have stowage boxes or kind of doors for something in there. So long as you clean the mould lines off properly, all of these will pop into place nicely and fit the upper hull on top as well. But I'll fill all of the internals in first with the driver and co-driver seats, and here's where I go a little bit off script. The standard transport variant, /1, has long benches for the troops. The /9 Stummel has shorter benches because it makes room for some ammo racks. Now because I want to switch between the 2, but I'll probably be using the /1 transport variant more often, I'm going to include the longer benches. And somehow I managed to snap one of the seat backs while I pulled it from the sprue, but I glued it back together and I glued it in place in the hull, and it looks just fine in the end. All of these pieces do have slots to go into, but the keying isn't that strong, and so you'll have to make sure that they dry all nice and lined up. Now you could glue the hull top on, but I'll be keeping that separate for painting. And we just have a couple small pieces around the hull to put on. There's a towing hitch for the back, a headlight with a blackout slot that goes on the front left wheel arch, and on the very front of the hull you can either use the towing cable, which I used, or there is a spare wheel instead. For the /1 variant, it is armed with this little pintle machine gun and shield that goes around it, and that pops into the little hole on the front of the upper hull. But the Stummel variant also has something else that goes into that same place. And as soon as I started cleaning up the Stummel parts, I realised, oh good grief, those mould lines. They're not necessarily that big or difficult to clean, they're just very numerous, and they're on every bar and edge of this main gun piece, which took a minute to clean up. Once that was done, there's a little boxy piece that goes onto the front of it, and the gun's barrel in front of that, which is not slide moulded, and I don't particularly care because I think that drilled barrels are a bit of a meme. At the other end there's a little tray thing, shell catcher perhaps, that has some tabs that act as keying. As I wasn't necessarily impressed with the MG34 that came on the Stummel sprue, I nabbed the second one from the main sprues instead. And it's a slightly different shape, and so it doesn't sit perfectly straight. I hacked out a piece for the ammo feed to fit it a little better, and while it doesn't line up perfectly, it still looks better than the one that came on the Stummel sprue. There's an extended armour shield for the top of the hull that goes around the Stummel gun, and I built this wrong the first time round. These side pieces must go in front of that curved detail on the hull, rather than behind it as I show here. Rather, you should start with this mounting piece and glue the side armour panels to it. And you would usually glue all of these down to the upper hull, but as mentioned, I'm making this modular so that I can switch between the /9 and the /1. Once those armour panels are in place, the gun piece goes onto the top. And usually this would be separate so that it can traverse a little, or you can glue everything down, but I glued the Stummel pieces together to keep them as one modular piece, rather than having them all separate. Lastly, the gun sight, which is utterly tiny, and I think it goes on like this. The instructions aren't 100% clear. But it looks right, and so there's that. The last things in the kit are some stowage options, which can be added to your preference. And obviously you can throw in some stuff from your infantry sprues to make things more interesting. And speaking of infantry, there are 4 transported models that you could paint up and include in the kit. However, I've painted those up separately, and eventually I'll get around to basing them on individual bases just to be some sitting models for my German platoon. So there is my very nice 251/1 transport Hanomag with the alternate piece to make it a /9 Stummel. And you can see that the Stummel bits don't fit perfectly because they are a separate panel, and so I need to give them a little flex so that it looks better, but I don't mind as I'm going to be using the /1 more often. The kit is generally much better than I thought when I first picked up the sprues, and it results in a very solid model that will survive the rigours of tabletop wargaming. I actually feel it's even a little more solid than the American M3 kit that is a counterpart to it. It does have a fair amount of detail, but of course a lot less than a display modelled kit would have. But once it's painted, and you paint in a bit of weathering and other details like that, it will look fantastic on the gaming table. As mentioned, I will be painting this eventually, but it won't be next week, so check back every now and again to see whenever it is I get to that. If you'd like to comment, drop those below, but I can end this video by saying I'm ED-SKaR, always will be, and thank you very much for watching.